Happy Thursday. It is Therapy Thursday. Welcome to Transforming Trauma podcast with Dr. Triffy. Every Thursday, my intention at this time is to show up and teach skills and strategies to help us think better so we can feel better and we can do better in this thing called life. I hope we can transform whatever traumatic experiences we've had into passion and purpose and power. Tonight, I'm talking about a sensitive issue. I decided to talk about this because the semester is upon us. The brand new fall semester is upon us. And for those who have not yet started, they're getting ready to start in 2 weeks' time. Now, I'm focusing on kids between the ages of 12 to 17. And I would say the tweens between 10 and 12. And I'm hoping I'm reaching their parents and their families tonight. As your kids leave home and they head back to school, they're going to be meeting many new friends from many different backgrounds. You might have blessed them with a new phone, with a new iPad, with a new computer, because you want your child to succeed in school. Many of you might not be thinking about pornography. And when I talk about pornography for people my age, I wonder what you think about. Do you think about Playboy magazines? Do you think about Hef? This is important for you because research and studies show that most pornography and sexual addictions begin during what stage you think? Type it in the chat. What stage of life do you think most people become addicted to sex or pornography? And what is very difficult about that is most people, because of the sensitive nature of the topic and the subject, they do not seek treatment until later in life when the problem has become pervasive, when it's caused many problems in many areas of their lives. So I was just talking about Hef and Playboy magazines. Pornography today, if you're keeping up, that what many of our teenagers are exposed to is much different than what many of us conceptualize. Yeah? Think about it. Some of the biggest barriers that kept porn away from young men, young women, they don't exist anymore. What's different? Well, and why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem for many people. It's a burdensome, painful issue for people who become addicted and who begin to use porn in a compulsive way, because for many people, there are religious, cultural, personal, family factors that make that a heavy burden. Today, we have internet porn available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's at a click of your finger, just a tap of a screen. It's as close as your kid's smartphone. It's as close as the object you gave your child to help them stay safe. And if you didn't do that, maybe you blessed them with a PS4 or an Xbox or a Nintendo. And those can be ways that your children get introduced to very explicit pornography in their home. So a few years ago, I was in private practice and a young man came to me, engaged to be married. He was Christian. His presenting problem, he thought himself to be addicted to pornography. And this young man was in so much emotional pain because that conflicted with his Christian beliefs, with his intentions for his wife to be, and it was very psychologically oppressive. So I know that many people are socialized, especially male people are socialized to believe that this is regular and this everything is what's wrong with this? What's wrong with porn? It's okay. Well, perhaps it can become a problem when what started off as curiosity becomes a compulsion. Becomes a compulsion. What is a compulsion? Compulsion is I cannot stop doing something, even if I tell myself I want to, and even when I make attempts to. So that's what I want to talk about tonight. So let's start with some statistics. 93% of boys and 62% of girls are exposed to porn before the age of 18. 70% of boys have spent at least 30 consecutive minutes, as in not 5 minutes and they take a break and 5 minutes and they take a break, but 30 consecutive minutes looking at online porn, at least on one occasion. 67% of kids, I say kids, but I'm talking about our children and teenagers, they admit to doing something that many of us parents who love them very much and who think we're doing a good job of monitoring them and what they're doing, 67% of them admit that they clear their internet history to hide their online activity. I know I'm talking to a parent whose kid is a professional at going incognito and who has connected with various groups or sites online where they fall down the rabbit hole. 79% of accidental exposures happen at home, happen in their home. Do you know how many parents were being adults, and this is my right and I'm an adult and I'm choosing to do this, but they were not paying attention and they were not guarding their children and the kids were accidentally exposed? Do you know how many kids were encouraged by their friends to, hey, you meet a new buddy in school and they tell you, go check out that website. Have you ever seen that website? Go check out that website. I remember another family where the little boy started middle school, went off to school, excited, new group of friends, and they directed him to a certain website, the name was innocuous. I mean, it was not a name that you would automatically be able to say, it was an X-rated site. And it was back in the day when we had, desktops. And the poor little thing, he got into the site and he could not get out of it. And he freaked out, ran to his parents and said, look, I can't stop. I can't. He wanted to cut it off. He wanted to, when he saw what was happening on the site, he wanted to click out of it. But by then, what do you think happened? His interest was piqued. And this kid is still struggling today. And I say struggling because this is a child who grew up in a religious culture, in a faith where it's incompatible. So there you are now as an adult trying to reconcile the two. Here's another stat. 56% of divorce cases involve at least one party having an obsessive interest in online porn. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? About 3%, about only 3% of pornographic websites require age verification. What does that mean? Your 6-year-old could get in there. Your 6-year-old could get in there. So the average age of a child first sees internet porn seems to be about the age of 11. And again, what I'm talking about tonight is not just curiosity. Every child is a human being who's becoming an adult, who's going to be learning adult things. So that must begin at a certain point. What I'm talking about is when curiosity and exploration turns to compulsion, where your child cannot stop, where it interferes with their sense of peace, their feelings about themselves, their thoughts about themselves, and how they carry themselves in life, in relationships, at work, at school. So, what do you want to be looking for? What are we looking for when we start thinking about compulsive behavior? Well, we want to think about the frequency of the behavior. How often does it happen? Well, your teenager might look at porn with his friends twice a year, or your teenager might be looking at porn twice a day. You see what I'm saying? Twice a day. Duration. How long has this been happening? Yeah. How long has, if you call the compulsion a problem, how long has the problem been existing? Well, it just started, or this little child who it started for him in middle school, and he's been trying to stop, but it persists now even into serious relationships that he's forming. And we all know that it's more than likely going to cause distress between him and his mate once she finds out. And I say once she finds out because the likelihood of her finding out drastically increases when they get married and start living together. The intensity refers to the nature of the material that the child is viewing. Again, the stuff that many of us were aware of when we were teenagers in magazines is completely different to what's available 24/7, 365 days of the year to the children and teenagers right now. The viewing of hardcore, intense images like that increase the likelihood of addiction because of the intensity and the shocking nature. Because it's just so much, it increases the likelihood of addiction because the amount of, I'll talk about that a little later, the amount of dopamine your body releases is so much. And you marry that to the way the brain records images, and it's a potent mixture for addiction. And then you have risk-taking behaviors. What does that mean? A big factor in any kind of addiction is, what is a person willing to do to get access? And do they get to a point where they need more and more intense, graphic material to feel what they used to feel when they started? And maybe sometimes for your teenager, does that include what you as a parent might describe as oppositional behavior or defiant behavior, or skipping school, or lying to parents, or say your church group leaders? That's what risk-taking looks like. Okay, so I talked about dopamine a while ago. How do we become addicted? How do we become addicted? How do we start acting in a way that we might have started as, hey, yeah, that's interesting, fascinating. But no, that's all I want to do. I don't want to get up to go to school, or I'm going to sleep so late because I'm up and I won't do my homework, and I'm not passing my tests anymore because I didn't sleep, because that's where I am all night as a teenager. So, of course, a teen's curious interest and their searching on the internet can turn to serious compulsion. And dopamine is the basis of the compulsion. Dopamine is a chemical in your brain. It's a feel-good chemical that gets released when we're doing things that make us feel accomplished, excited, when we laugh, sometimes when we exercise, we eat, and when you have sex. Yeah? That's one of the big hormones that gets released. So when dopamine gushes and that connects with our memories, the visual images, yeah, get recorded. That encourages you, of course, as a natural human being, to want to repeat the behavior that elicited the dopamine and the feel goodness. It makes complete sense. It makes sense. Yeah. So when you have an excess of dopamine being released, like almost immediately, that is what creates the desire to keep repeating, to keep watching, because your brain wants more of that good feeling. You build tolerance because after a while, what you started off, say grade 1 level, it's not enough. And because there's so much availability of every level of pornography available, in a frightening way, the sky becomes the limit. Okay? In a frightening way, the sky becomes the limit. So the child begins to need to consume more and more porn just to get the same high, because it is a high. It's the same mechanism as if your child was addicted to coke, heroin, meth, marijuana, if you view that as and anything again can be an addiction, become an addiction because of the way you use it. Somebody might smoke 1 joint a week, another one might smoke 2 a day. So a lot of kids can keep that addiction hidden from other people. Why? I mean, your phone is so private. We have locks on our phone these days. We have fingerprints. Yeah. So for these young people, because their problems might not manifest in problems or challenges in life, they might deny that a problem exists. Yeah, and could become experts in self-deception and other people deception. Okay, so for some people, it's really not until they decide, you know what, yeah, I'm done, I want to stop. You know, they might meet their first little girlfriend and their girlfriend starts saying, ew, I don't like that. And they want to stop. And now they realize they cannot stop. That's when many people realize that an addiction has developed. Okay? So, what do you do? What do you do as a parent? What do you do as a church youth leader, as a therapist, even, an older sibling, who you're dealing with a teenager who is, like I said, experiencing puberty. They're thinking about regular wanting to connect, I want to kiss so and so, I want to hug so and so. But after viewing pornography, their brain becomes exposed to so much more. And so their ideas expand to so much more graphic images. Yeah. They become exposed to, in many cases, violence, and they associate that now with sex, which many of us would argue was designed for pleasure and connecting. So you have children and teenagers now becoming open to the idea that their mates are just objects. That's just my pleasure vehicle. Not a real person. And the brain, being what the brain is, begins to fantasize about much more graphic things that it is exposed to in images. So that becomes a potential. That becomes a potential. And who suffers? Well, I know many, again, I've worked with many people who the mates usually suffer. And the person who is experiencing the compulsion can experience a lot of guilt, a lot of helplessness, a lot of powerlessness and shame. And, life is about living to your fullest in a free way. And so that can become a huge burden. So what do you want to look for as a parent, teacher, older sibling, grandmother, auntie, uncle, somebody who's interested in your teenager, in your tween? Well, look for your kids if they start isolating themselves and if they're trying to stay up extra late at night. Look out if they're trying to prevent you from looking at their pictures. If you're a wise parent, you will find a way to always have access to your children's phone. Whose phone is it? You bought the phone for the child, but whose phone is it if you bought the phone and you're paying the phone bill? If you notice your child trying to hide or attempting to keep secrets. Some kids are overwhelmed enough, and some, I would say, brave enough to confess and to tell you that this is what happened. Sometimes there's denial and anger and a big pushback when you start asking them questions about it. Some will continue viewing it, although they feel overwhelmed by it, again, because it becomes a compulsive behavior. Why? The brain is feeling so good. There's depression, irritability, anger with some kids. There's hypersexuality. Now they become, what does that mean? Hyper means over and above, right? Extra. So a normal teenager, yes, will be interested in boys, he'll be interested in girls or whatever. But you see some kids become overly focused on this. And you want to ask questions. You want to find out more. You might listen to the words they're using. Their vocabulary changes. Their behavior changes. And again, like I say, that for me, a big sign is that overprotective nature surrounding the phone. Surrounding the phone. So, for many people, what ends up happening over time is pornography can become, say, a path of least resistance because I can create a counterfeit relationship. If I'm getting so much pleasure from images, why bother with somebody who's going to irritate me and want things from me and want my time? And the pleasure response I'm getting from that is not enough to compete with the pornography. It's easier for somebody that's seeking acceptance to just go click. And what is that phase of life about? In large measure, adolescence is about figuring out yourself, and kids become very, very focused on what their peers think, even more so than what you think as a parent. Yeah. So that acceptance piece is very big in teenage life. And if they're not getting that from their peers, say they feel awkward, which many kids do, many teenagers do, their bodies are changing. They're trying to fit in. They're trying to establish themselves. If they're not really getting that, and it's so easy to click, many of them turn to that. Yeah. And they don't have to worry about being embarrassed or rejected or made fun of. So it fills the void of loneliness for many teenagers because it can give them a false sense of connection and attachment. Yeah? So, because it's never been so easy, because this is your reality as a parent, as an adult in your teenager's life, in your child's life, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? I didn't mention this yet, but have you had discussions with your teenager about sending pictures of themselves to other people? And the legal ramifications of that for them potentially. That can cause a lot of pain. And the phase of life it's a prime opportunity. It's a prime opportunity for so much potential negative impact if we're not really watching and supervising and supporting and helping our teenagers. So I'm going to say again, you start noticing your kids grades dropping, their mood changing, they're becoming more irritable, surly, and it's easy sometimes to just brush it off as puberty. You might want to dig a little deeper. You might want to ask for help. Find a therapist, somebody that your child might feel very comfortable talking to. They might not want to talk to you about it because it's too yucky, but they might talk to a therapist or a counselor about it. So there are several assessments that can be used. I want to give you the name of a center. It's called the Youth Pornography Addiction Center, and they've got several free resources for families and church organizations and people who are wanting to help their teenagers. My number one recommendation is to approach your child. Approach your child. I would hope that by this time you had created enough of a bond and an open line of communication with your children so that as they move into teenage life, the yuckiness that's coming with puberty, that can help to balance that a little bit. Because very often that relationship and that communication is going to take a hit. Yeah. But if you've built something very solid before up to this point, it becomes a little easier. If you've trained your children to talk to you about everything, I'm telling you, it's going to get uncomfortable for most of them because their bodies are doing very weird things to them. Their brain is doing a lot of weird things to their bodies. Yeah. So it's going to be tough, but you're going to make it easier if you had already set it up that way. Talking about sex makes most human beings who grew up in religious organizations feel uncomfortable. We think it's a bad word, but it's a reality for our children. So we can choose to let them battle this alone. Or we can talk about sex with our children. We can talk about pornography with our children, and we can educate them. Why? If we don't, they're going to learn it elsewhere. And we're probably going to prefer the outcome if we pump them full of our best ideas about sex versus allowing everything and everybody else on the internet to do it for us. So one stat says that 79% of teenagers and young adults who want to stop using porn say they had nobody in their life helping them. Why? Because many of their adults were too uncomfortable talking about it. And so their young people were suffering alone and trying to get these answers from everybody else. If you don't remember anything, remember, if your kids are not going to talk to you about sex, the media is going to do it for them. When I say media, I'm not talking about TV only. I'm talking about this thing right here where everybody and their grandmother is writing whatever they're thinking and posting whatever they want. And there are actual sites where your kids could go and just fall down into the abyss. So the best thing you can do as a parent is to help your teenager understand by having regular age-appropriate conversations with your children about sex at an early age. Give it to them in morsels that they can digest and expound on it as they get older. Arrange times to have open conversations. There's no way around it. It's conversation. And you might be feeling very uncomfortable. You might be feeling very uncomfortable. And I know for many parents who have, say, a history of sexual abuse or trauma related to sex and whatever else, your own religious ideas. Oh my God, even the word, can I even say the word? I'm a horrible person. I don't want to be that's yucky. You know what I mean? I'm inviting you to deal with your own, all of that. so that you can be a more efficient parent for your children. Yeah, there's no other way because they're going to find it out. And very early because we give them access to technology early. So there must be something to balance it. There must be something to balance it. Okay? Some practical things you can do. Determine the appropriate age to give your child a smartphone. There are other types of phones. There are flip phones. I know they're not as cool, but you're the person buying and you're the person paying. So as a parent, you have to decide what you want to be grappling with your children. Just because their friends have smartphones doesn't mean that they're ready. If you know they're not ready, if you have not talked with them in a meaningful way, in a consistent way about how to prepare for the assault that they will face on these smartphones. Yeah, it's easy. It's easy, but children are still going to find ways around things because they will have other friends who have information. So I was going to say it's easy to do things like set parental controls, yeah, on your electronics and the smartphones, but you've got to be talking to your children to prepare them for the assault. It is not in their best interest to leave your children wide open for assault, because that's what it is. There ought to be a balance, and that balance should come from you as the parent, as the loving parent. As the loving parent, the balance of the information should come from you. Teach your children about apps. Yeah, teach them about, prep them. In a similar way, I think that many of us worry that if we talk to somebody who seems to be very depressed about suicide, then somehow that's going to cause them to hurt themselves. Talking to your child about what they're going to face on that level is not going to be what prompts them to be more inquisitive about it. Because you're giving them the balance. You're giving them the balance. You know it's coming. It's like knowing a storm is coming, but you're battening down the hatches. Yeah, you're preparing for it because it is coming. Yeah, set some boundaries around electronics. So it's not with all parents, but there are many parents who struggle with telling their kids it's time to turn off the phone, or having a process or a procedure, maybe where the kids leave the phone, you leave the phone out here in the living room or whatever, in this box, at this time, because now it's bedtime. And many of us allow our children to go, like, to have unlimited access to electronics while we're fast asleep, getting ready for work tomorrow. Our kids, for many of us, they're still up watching whatever that we have given them access to by the technology we've provided for them. So if we're going to equip them with these tools, which have their benefit, you have the responsibility to educate your child on the other side. On the other side. Yeah. Teach your kids how to deal with abstinence. Prepare your kids. Have talks about how to be in relationship, how to view people. If not, again, they will be wide open and, in my mind, completely vulnerable and open to assault. Okay? So that's my offering on porn addiction tonight with teens. Adults can do whatever they want, and they can deal with the consequences of their mates saying, I'm leaving you because I feel so whatever. When you watch this, adults can make their choices, but kids are our responsibility. And the semester has started for many of them. Let's get those kids prepped and ready. Okay? Nugent, how are you? Aaron, how are you? Facebook user. I am doing well, Facebook user. Nugent says, a deep, deep conversation. Most parents are scared to death. And a lot of that is about the shame that you're taught to think about sex with from the time you're a child in many of our religions. Let's admit it. Yeah. And some people have trauma related to sex, sexual abuse histories, and that makes it uncomfortable. But still, that is not an excuse. I don't think that's a good enough excuse to not prepare your children for what you know is coming. That's neglect. That's neglectful, really. Yeah. Gregory says, I believe the parents need to be trained first because they have no idea, because they had no one to teach them before. I agree. I agree with you on that. And I think that knowing that you're not strong in an area, you have a responsibility to become strong in that area. You have a responsibility to learn, to get support. Because the thing is, the assault is not going to go away just because you didn't know about it. Nugent says, not even the famous Dr. Spock could address this teen topic on sex. It has to be addressed. And the fallout, when it's not addressed, is very insidious. It's insidious. And people, it's easy to talk about suicide. It's easy to talk about depression. But if families are the core and one of the basic units of any community, you make that larger, town, country, world. If we are not having healthy relationships because one spouse has a compulsive way that they regard one of the most important aspects of relational life, we're setting ourselves up. We're setting ourselves up. Yeah, we're setting ourselves up. So I want to thank you all for showing up tonight. I hope you take the opportunity to speak to your children and to speak, some of you, to your spouses, and maybe you all can talk and make some new negotiations about certain behaviors that leave parts of the relationship, one party of the relationship, feeling very uncomfortable. I think this is a topic that is just unavoidable. It's unavoidable. I don't see it makes zero sense to ignore it, because kids especially, they're going to face it. Okay, and as the semester starts, let's get in gear and do a good job as parents. Okay, I hope I see you all next Thursday for Transforming Trauma. If you want to hear Dr. Tripping, on Saturday at 8 o'clock, I am having a discussion with a few Dominicans on the consultations that we're having regarding upgrading our electoral process. And I'm hoping to see you there. All right. See you next Thursday. Gregory, have a good night. And Nugent.